Workspace Podcast is recorded at Workspace Provision Co. in Youngsville, North Carolina. If you would like to get involved or sponsor our next episode, email us workspacepodcastnc@gmail.com.
A business hub where you can go. It's a Workspace Provision Co. A business hub where you can go. It's a Workspace Provision Co.
My name's Grant Paxton. I am here in the Bonsai podcast room of Workspace Provision. This is the Workspace Podcast. I have a very special guest today, Mr. Brian Pate. How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm glad to be here. Excited to sit down and get to talk to you. I've heard a lot about you, and
Awesome.
I'm looking forward to this.
All good things, I assume. That's the cliche we say.
Absolutely. It's all positive so far, at least.
Yeah. Brian, you are killing it in the real estate world. You have become quite a AI, artificial intelligence guru. I have a list of questions, some things I want to bring up for you to give us some insight on the real estate world. But first, brag about yourself a little bit. Tell us about you.
So, born in Tallahassee, Florida, grew up in Myrtle Beach. When people ask me where's home, beach is home. Went to college at the University of Oklahoma. In the words of my father, the freshman year was the year of the $10,000 party. And I discovered two things. I discovered draft beer and women, and then on a side order of pool.
Okay.
And so I went to school for a year there, and then I did not.
Okay.
And at that point, Dad said, "I think it's time for you to pay for college on your own." And
Right.
I was an entrepreneurial spirit at a young age. I started my first business when I was 14 years old.
Oh, wow.
I was DJing for my friends' birthday parties with 2 jam boxes that were dual cassette decks. I had
Oh,
a massive
nice.
music collection.
Yeah.
Grew up with Dad bringing home albums every week. So we listened to everything from Ferrani and Teicher to Billy Joel.
Fantastic.
And I'll bet that's your first and last Ferrani and Teicher reference on the podcast. By
Yeah,
the way.
I think who is that now? Okay.
Yeah. The kids can Google it. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
But moved to Raleigh in 1989. I did a little bit of work with WCW as a ring announcer for World Championship Wrestling. That was kind of where I got out of my shell a little bit. Was a DJ on the radio and nightclubs, traveled the world DJing at one point.
Were you the guy that said, "Let's ready to rumble"? Or
No, that would be
Okay.
Michael Buffer, but I did get
Okay.
to meet him once.
I wondered, yeah.
He was at the Hilton when I was DJing at Bowties in the North Raleigh Hilton many years ago when he came in town to announce a boxing match. And he actually did a drop for me. So it said, this is DJ Brian Pate. Are you ready for him to rumble? And that kind of thing. It was a lot of fun. But we did that. 1992, I decided I got tired of being on the road constantly. It sounds like a great life for a 21, 22-year-old, and it was. There were many of those nights that I was told that I had a great time the next morning by the people that were there with me. And just decided I was getting to a point where it was time to settle down a little bit. Met a girl. Got my real estate license in August of 1993, got married in August of 1994, and started DJing at the Long Branch in Raleigh. For those that are listening that remember the Long Branch, it was the place to go.
Very nice.
Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights back in the 80s and 90s. And then got real deep into the real estate. I retired from the club business in 1999 when my oldest daughter was born.
Okay.
Got into doing weddings and corporate events and stuff like that. If it had been 2025, I'd have probably set up a podcast studio like this.
Yeah.
And did that for many years. Loved it because it was always the greatest day of people's lives. And
Sure.
the only downside of it was occasionally dealing with the bride's mother that was a little more difficult. And in the midst of all that, I took a job as an assistant manager for Fonville Morrissey Realty, which at the time was the number one independent in the marketplace. Moved up the ladder there, went to the corporate office for a while, went back and managed one of their sales offices, and left there in 2012, went to Keller Williams, had a great experience at Keller Williams for many years, was a team leader twice on 2 separate occasions. During the time I was leading the office in 2015, we became the number 1 listing office in the entire Raleigh Triangle real estate market, which is a big step. We were doing, $1.25 billion a year in sales back in those days, and had a team. We were one of the top 50 teams in the entire Triangle. I had 2 people working for me that were not on the payroll. Their names were I don't know, and it wasn't me. And so I allowed attrition to take a couple of folks to different paths, had to let a couple folks go. But ultimately today I'm a solo agent, and I've been completely solo now for a little over 2.5 years. And so the part I like about it right now is when something goes wrong, I know who did it.
Right.
And in the words of my father, if you were going to kick the person in the butt that was the cause of most of your problems, you wouldn't sit for a week. So, as you can tell, my dad is a significant influence on me. He's my best friend. He's a person I go to for counsel. And so he wasn't really thrilled about me moving to Raleigh in 1989, but as we look back on it, it was the best thing I ever did, getting out on my own, supporting myself. And he got to a point where he says, if you're doing that, we're cutting off your corner of the table and breaking your plate, and you got to do it on your own. And when there's pressure like that, you end up making things happen through all the obstacles that take place.
That's incredible. You have quite a journey, and you've taken pieces of that and modeled some things from your father.
Absolutely.
That's a really important thing. I have a lot of sayings my dad said too, and I carry that with me.
I think we all do.
Yeah.
My father's favorite thing to do and I would argue, I was an only child. So whenever there was a discussion, no matter what they said, I would argue with them. And Dad referred to me for about 4 years as Mr. Argument. And whenever he would prove me wrong and I would not admit it, he'd go, I rest my case.
There you go.
So that was, and I still carry that one with me.
Yeah.
He's got a couple of others that are not proper for a family-friendly event, so I'll leave those alone.
Fair enough. You were diving a little bit into real estate. I'm going to take the opportunity myself to get free advice from you while we're here. What should a buyer do to prepare for purchasing a home? What's your advice?
It's a great question. And a lot of times buyers will make the mistake of starting to look online. They get excited about a house. They find one they want to see. They contact an agent and they want to go look at it immediately. And then well-trained agents are going to pause you. They're going to want to meet with you face to face. They're going to want to talk about the process so that you understand that process.
Right.
And the first step in it is always getting pre-approved or pre-qualified at least. You got to speak to a mortgage lender. You have to understand your real estate agent understands numbers and understands the generic aspect of qualifying with the ratios that they'll use, whether it's a conventional FHA, VA, USDA loan or some kind of assist loan. But ultimately, it's the mortgage lender that's going to tell you, here are all the fees, here's what you're going to pay. Here's, the realtor's job is to say it'll probably cost you between $10,000 and $15,000 to get closed. It's the mortgage lender's job to say it's $12,651.37.
Got it.
And you need to know that number, because if you if you only are going to qualify for a house that's maybe $350,000 and I'm showing you $400,000, that's a significant step down when you come back into reality. And as I've said for years, I don't want to show you a steak and then have to sell you a hamburger.
Right.
And I think that's probably the biggest mistake that people make. The other thing that they make is people are trying to time the market these days. I get people hitting me on my YouTube channel and on TikTok and all of those with direct messages. Hey, my wife and I are thinking about buying here in the next couple of months. Do you think it's better to go ahead and do it now or wait and see what the rates do? Because they may go down 1/8 of a point.
Yeah.
Well, by the time that rate's gone down 1/8 of a point, the house is appreciated by probably 1/4%.
Okay.
And you just lost every bit of money that you could have done.
I got it.
So instead of trying to time the market, get into the market, because you cannot possibly outsave appreciation of the house. I mean, think about it. If you'd have bought a house in 2019 in the Triangle market when the average sale price was $275,000, today the average sale price is almost $400,000. And so you would have made $125,000 in the last 6 years just by sitting on the sideline and owning. And that's where a lot of people miss it. Now, you also have people that are like, well, but my friend said that I should be able to get a rate of sub 4%. Sorry, that's a dream world now. The Fed realized what a huge mistake that was in 2020 and 2021. And from March 15th, 2022 to June 15th of 2022, a 90-day window, the average national interest rate went from 3.1% to over 6.5% in 90 days.
Wow.
So what happens if you're thinking, well, I'm going to wait on the market and see if I can get a better deal? Usually people that try to get a better deal end up shooting themselves in the foot unintentionally. And so a lot of times, and I don't care what you think of your realtor. If you think they're incompetent, then it's time to find another realtor. But when the realtor looks at you and says, this is this and that is that, and you respond with, well, my brother's sister's cousin said that I should do this. Well, how many houses have they sold?
Right.
You know, I had an ad many years ago when we had our team. It was a billboard on I-40. Some of your listeners may have seen it. And the ad said, your cousin sold 2 houses last year. Our team sold over $100 million worth of real estate. Who would you rather work with? Who do you trust more? And experience matters. And so we get, in the last 6 years, we've probably added 30,000 licensees in the state of North Carolina.
Wow.
That's a net number. We've probably had 50 to 60,000 people that got their real estate license, and half of them are probably walked away already or gone into a different discipline.
Yeah.
And so the experience in the marketplace matters. The other problem that we have, though, is an agent starts out telling you, well, I've been in the business for 30 years. Well, maybe so, but you haven't been in this market for 30 years because the market has flipped on its tail twice since 2022.
When getting advice maybe from the wrong person or saying, hey, I'm going to wait a little bit until this deal is better. Let me flip that around. When is the best time to walk away from a deal?
Yeah, so a lot of people, there's a couple of things that we have that are unique in the state of North Carolina. We have a due diligence period where it includes the inspections, but it also includes a non-refundable fee.
Okay.
And that's unique to our state. I was listening to another agent talk about a deal that they've got with people moving from Colorado, and they wanted to use the Colorado contract in North Carolina. Well, if the listing agent receives an offer on a Colorado document, they're going to send it back, say, put this on a North Carolina document.
Okay.
So that's the first step in it, is understanding what the process is. And again, that's part of understanding what that procedure is. The due diligence money is basically a non-refundable fee that you're going to pay directly to the seller. That money counts towards your total for the purchase if you complete it. If you don't complete the purchase, then you lose that $1,000, $1,500, $20, $2,000, whatever it was. The reason that you look at that is because if you come up with an inspection report, and let's say the HVAC system has to be replaced, or the roof, or any other major mechanical system, that could be a $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 project, and you may be better off, if the seller's refusing to fix that, you may be better off forfeiting your $1,000 to $1,500 and go find you something else where somebody's going to be cooperative. Now, at the same time, from a negotiation standpoint, you can leverage that and say, look, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, if you don't fix this for us, you're going to have to fix it for somebody, because now it's been identified, which means the listing agent, by real estate commission rule and laws in North Carolina, has to disclose that issue with the HVAC system.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah.
So there's a point where you have to decide, am I better off walking away than I am committing more money and knowing that I'm going to have a $10,000, $12,000 expense down the road?
Yeah. Now, people fall in love with homes, though.
Yes.
And that gets in the way.
It's emotional.
How do you manage that when you're working with individuals?
So my job is to make it a business transaction. We are making a business deal.
Okay.
I don't get emotional about properties. I don't get emotional about clients. Well, I say that. I get emotional about clients in certain situations.
Yeah, I understand.
But when you're looking at it, the buyer has to understand we are purchasing a commodity. It's no different than purchasing a stock. It's no different than going to the grocery store and you have 1 gallon of milk that's $5 because it's got, all of the organic whatever in it.
Yeah.
And then you've got the $1.99 gallon of milk that's the Food Lion brand that probably came out of a local cow somewhere and's been processed significantly.
Sure.
You have a choice to make. Do you want to buy the generic and spend a little less money? Or do you want to build the custom home, like the $5 gallon of milk, and buy the perfect house? There's a significant difference between the house that I'm showing you being a house and being the house.
Yeah.
So, for example, during COVID times when things were moving so quickly, buyers were getting into something so that they could build appreciation. Now buyers are a lot more discerning. They have a few more choices on the market. The inventory's bumped up by about 20% in the last year. So buyers where they had 5 choices a year and a half ago, they now probably have 10, maybe 12. So they can find a house that's a little bit closer. But we can't manufacture a house that you're describing. Just because you want a 3,000 square foot home with a 2-car garage on a 2-acre lot for $200,000 doesn't mean that I can make that suddenly appear. I am not a genie.
Yeah, I wish I knew what the trends were. I've bought several homes in my lifetime, and I say that I sound like an old man. It makes me feel like an old man, but what are the trends now? Maybe what are they locally versus, and this is probably a loaded question, but locally versus in the country?
Yeah, so the average sale price last year across the United States, I believe it was about $305,000. But that's kind of like saying the average temperature in the United States today is 47 degrees.
Yeah, sure.
It's different no matter where you are. Real estate is hyperlocal. And if you look at the numbers here in the Triangle market, a lot of real estate agents are complaining that last year's market, 2025, was so tough. Well, it was darn near identical to 2016, and everybody was talking about how great it was. So a lot of it is perspective. And so I think, one of the nice things about being an old fart in the business is that I remember I have a spreadsheet that I've been tracking since 1994.
Okay.
With the average list price, the average sale price, what's the average days on the market. To tell you how old it is, it started on Lotus 123. Okay. I'm glad to let you know that I've migrated to Google Sheets and
good.
Excel now.
Good.
It took me kicking and screaming to get to it. But when you can look at past performance, you get to understand a little bit more about what we expect from future activity.
Yeah.
It's kind of like watching the stock market. You know that certain times of the year are going to be different. So this proverbial spring market that everybody talks about, yeah, that's when most people sell their homes because you get more money for it. So why do so many buyers say, I want to wait till spring when there are more choices? Well, you're also going to overpay because you waited till spring. My number one month every year is December, and the second busiest month is September.
Really?
And that's because I've told people this is the opportunity. You're going to have less choices, but people that have to sell in December, you can usually negotiate a better deal.
Speaking about deals,
Yeah.
I heard, or you told me something about this deal. You have this crazy story, and the numbers are kind of backwards. It's something like listed at 425 and offer at 375, but counter at 475.
Yeah. So this is one of my favorite stories to tell in my classes. So when I'm teaching real estate agents how to negotiate, I had a listing, and it's a true story. When you've been in the business so long, you don't have to make up anything to prove your point.
Yeah.
But the house is listed for 425.
Okay.
Buyer's agent calls me, says, I'm bringing you an offer, all excited. And this is a market when things are selling at or just barely below list price, less than 1% below list price at the time. So I was expecting an offer maybe 420, 422, somewhere in that ballpark. Yeah. Offer comes in, it's 375,000.
Oh no.
And I call the seller. Seller's first reaction, well, that's BS. I mean, I let him yell about it for a little bit.
Sure.
Because I've always said if the balloon is full of air and you squeeze it and try to manipulate it, it pops.
Yeah.
But if you let a little bit of air out of it, it's open to a little bit more adjustment.
Yeah.
So I told him, I said, I got an idea. I don't know if it'll work, but are you willing to try something outside of the box?
Okay.
And he says, well, what you got in mind? And I told him, he says, all right, let's go for it. Let's see what happens. So I texted the agent and I said, I've got a counter offer for you.
Okay.
And so the agent was real quick to get back to me. He says, all right, I got a piece of paper. I'm ready. I said, all right, your counter offer, remember list price is 425. They've made an offer of 375. And I said, the counter offer is 475,000. And there was this pause. And I hear the agent go, it sounded like a seal, clapping his hand.
Yeah.
And he says, you mean 375? I said, no, I mean 475. He says, the house is listed for 425. I said, that's correct. He says, and you're countering at $50,000 above? And I said, that's correct. He says, that's insane. And I said, that's what the seller said about your buyer's offer when it came in.
Right.
And all of a sudden there was that recognition And we ended up selling the house at $423,000 because well, I basically told him, I said, when your guy gets serious, my guy will get serious.
Yeah.
And so, and I'm not saying that works in every situation, because negotiation is figuring out, okay, what am I willing to do? What am I not willing to do? What am I willing to lose in order to get this done? Is speed a factor, et cetera? And so one of the things that I always do in my process is I call the listing agent before I make an offer for a buyer and say, tell me what the best possible scenario is here for the seller. And is the date the most important thing? Is the sale price the most important thing? Are the terms the most important thing? And if the agent responds, well, all of those, well, duh, which is the most important? Would they rather get out quick? Would they be willing to give up $2,500 in order to get out a week earlier? Or would it be better for them if they close at the end of March instead of having to make their payment in April? And things like that. The mistake that a lot of real estate agents are making these days is the only thing the buyer agent asks is, how much is my commission? Because we can't advertise that anymore because of some of the rules and regulations that came about. So the agents have to do a better job of tell me more about what the seller scenario is so that I can help them. And then the listing agent has to be willing to have that conversation without revealing negotiating position, anything confidential and things like that. You still have to represent your seller to the best of your ability. I have to represent my buyer to the best of my ability. But you have to understand, when the seller's got a house to sell and you have a buyer that's ready, willing, and able, you got to figure out how to make that happen. And the ultimate deal is when everybody wins. Well, I'm sorry, that's just not possible sometimes. As Jerry Reed said in his country song back in 1978, somebody's going to get the gold mine and somebody's going to get the shaft occasionally.
Yeah.
But you have to figure out how big of a shaft you're willing to take before you're willing to walk away. You may be better off taking a $25,000 offer that's lower than to sit there for another 6 months paying $4,000 a month in mortgage payment.
Yeah, right.
And again, that's where it comes back to your original question of, you have to understand how to make the deal. It is a business decision. It cannot be emotional. And usually when emotion gets involved and somebody gets angry, that's when deals fall apart.
Workspace Provision Co., your spot to create, connect, and grow. Flexible offices and event spaces made for entrepreneurs and dreamers. Come see what's possible. To learn more, visit workspaceprovision.com. My wife and I, we watch a lot of HGTV. We love it or list it, the Property Brothers, Chip and Joanna Gaines. We modeled our home after them when that show first really was big. Do those kind of shows bother you? Are there inaccuracies? Is that real life or
No,
just?
It's not anywhere close. When you're watching people on HGTV and they say, Joe's a barback at a local pub and Mindy works in daycare and their budget is $3.5 million. That's a pile of crap.
My wife and I say that all the time. The husband photographs butterflies and mom is a stay-at-home mom.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. Right. And, I had the opportunity to be on one of those shows many years ago. I declined because they said, we only want you to narrow it down to 3 homes, and then the buyer's going to need to pick one of them, and we'll go through the process. Even if it falls through, that's made for TV. It's all scripted. And so it's not real life. So people that are, I just had a scenario where I've got a house under contract right now. The sellers are some of my favorite people that I've ever worked with. I've known their son for many years. But they did almost $185,000 worth of work to their home in the last 5 years because HGTV told them they would get every dollar back out of that. When they found out that they were going to get maybe $25,000 to $30,000 more than the other homes that had recently sold in the neighborhood because of it, they're sitting there going, well, wait a minute, what happened to my other $150,000? That sets an improper expectation. So I'm not a fan of those things. The Love It or Listed. I've got 3 friends in the state of North Carolina that have been on Love It or Listed. Every one of them said they regretted being on the show because the way that they fixed things was very sketchy. As my kids would say, it was very sketch and sus.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's my proper language. I'm going to get yelled at for that one. But
you nailed it.
When you look at that and you look at what are you sacrificing for that, it all ties into the same thing. They're selling clicks, they're selling views, they're selling likes and things like that. And ultimately, those shows are simply there to sell the products that advertise in between them.
That has to be hard for a real estate professional that maybe wants the visibility to be on the show, but is kind of going against the education of the field that they want to put out there.
Well, and that's part of the reason I said no. I told I mean, they made a very lucrative offer to me to do that.
All right.
You know, and not many agents get paid to be on those because they tell you, well, you're going to get advertisement out of it. Well, not when you don't put my company name anywhere on there and you don't show my for sale sign. So no, I'm not, because it's TV. I've been on the radio, I've been on TV before. So being out there going, hi, Mom, is not on my list of things that I have to do. I usually want to get away from those people. Now, if you want to feed your ego and you want to be able to say, as featured on HGTV, you go ahead and knock yourself out. That's just not my way of marketing.
That's admirable, really, because I play music a lot and I play live, and I have situations that look good and maybe a big stage or a big audience or something, and they're like, it's for exposure. And I have 2 young boys. That doesn't pay for diapers and food and things. If I were 18, 22 years old, I'd say, hell yeah, let's get up there, and I would love to do that just for my enjoyment.
Well, I did the same thing as a DJ. I mean, I built my business in Wake Forest as a DJ by playing things for free, and then began to charge a little bit more. You know, that's one thing. But to sit here and say, hey, we want you to speak at an event with 5,000 people. Okay, do you understand what it takes for me to prepare for a 2-hour keynote speech in front of 5,000 people? That's a 60-hour project for me, and you got to pay for it. And that's part of the reason that a lot of the events that I'm doing are on a smaller scale, which I like better. I don't need the big stage. You know, if I've got more than 150 people in the room, it's almost too big to really do any teaching. You can speak at them, but you can't really speak to them in that situation.
Tell me a little bit more about your public speaking or your teaching or classes that you do.
So the primary source of my classes is regulatory classes for the North Carolina Real Estate Commission. I teach commission-approved courses. They have what's called the BIC Up for full brokers that are supervising other agents, and then they have the general update, which is what most agents in the state take. About 25% of the agents in the state take the BIC Up. The remaining 75% take the general update. That's ballpark numbers. I don't have anything specific to tell you. But in addition to that, both of those classes are 4 hours. So every licensee in the state of North Carolina, it's about 121,000, I think, if I remember the last statistic. 121,000 people have to take one of those 4-hour classes. Then in addition to that, they have to take an elective, which is the same that you would think of from an elective in high school, an elective in college, but it's the subject matter of their choice. And I've been teaching that since 1995. I write my own classes to teach, because I feel like if I've studied it enough to write the class, there's a lot more detail, a lot more value in it. It creates more intriguing conversations in the class, and I can handle veering left or right and change the subject if there's a logical movement to that. So this all started when OpenAI in November of 22, when OpenAI went public in 22 with the ChatGPT. And that's that. I heard about it from a friend. I jumped on it. I was like, wow, this is really kind of interesting. As the son of a newspaper publisher, I was like, this can save me time writing, and I can have my dad's editing right in here with me. And so I started using it. And I was like, you know, other agents are using this. And I saw one agent that posted one of their listings in MLS, and at the very bottom of the page, it says, would you like for me create a Facebook or Instagram post for this ad? And they had posted that on the public site, which now appeared on Zillow.
It happened to me once in an email.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We've all made that mistake.
Yeah.
And you know, the number one thing you have to understand with language models, you have to proofread them, which means standing in front of a mirror and reading them out loud. And not reading what you think it says, but reading what it actually says. And that's a come to Jesus moment, as my grandma used to say. So with that, I caught up with a couple of people that I respect in the AI world. I got outside of real estate and started learning how other industries were using it. And it just sucked me in. If you're a Star Wars guy, it was the tractor beam pulling the Millennium Falcon in. If you don't know what that is, Google it. And that's from the original one, which now they label it as A New Hope or whatever, but it's Star Wars. Anyway, I'm not bitter. So I started learning more, and I was like, you know, other people need to learn how to use this properly. legally, because I was starting to see people posting things in MLS that were fair housing violations. They were statute of frauds violations because they weren't proofreading. So I decided, I called the head of the education and licensing department at the Real Estate Commission, and he and I are old friends. He's one of my mentors. And I asked him, I said, would you guys approve a class that was a little bit different format than you've ever seen before? And he was like, you know what, write it up. Let's look at it. Let's figure out how we can say yes, which I always love. I don't ever like telling people no. Let me tell you what I need to do in order to say yes.
Nice.
And so I went to writing. I probably spent 35, 40 hours writing it. I showed it to him. I sent him a copy of it. He sent me some notes back. We had a real estate educators conference in Virginia that I attended, and I taught about a 2 to 3 hour block of that class to other instructors to kind of test drive it. I had test driven it with a couple of my friends that are real estate agents, but nothing 3 or 4 hours in a row like is required. And the feedback was outstanding. They were like, I want to buy this class. Can you write this as a CE?
Wow.
So I finished writing it as a CE about a month later, got approval from the Real Estate Commission, and we have taught it to raving reviews. And a lot of times it's just people saying, you know, I was always scared to get into AI because I had seen what other people were doing. And we take real world scenarios and we teach them how to do those in the classroom.
Okay.
The students are on their phones. They're learning how to talk to OpenAI's ChatGPT, use the verbal commands. We then went and created an AI boot camp off of that, which is $250 per person, but they get 6 weeks in a row of training. So they see OpenAI's ChatGPT, Google's Gemini, and they learn how to use Claude for their brain. So business owners don't use Claude enough because it can be a great strategic discussion with it.
So this isn't just like an event. This is a course.
It is a CE course that gets 4 hours of credit from the Real Estate Commission, and we are working on getting it to a couple of other states right now. I've got hired a new course writer that's helping me with those things and doing all the stuff that I hate to do in the back end. She loves it. Lori Rogers joined me almost a year ago now, and she's been fantastic. She's moderated classes. She listens in while I'm teaching and points out things that I need to adjust.
Okay.
We talk through changes in course material and the curriculum. We're really stepping up our game, but we don't want to grow and scale to being 50 instructors and coaching programs. We want to keep it small so we can keep it personal with the students and the attendees that come to our events.
Now, what are some of maybe name a couple of specific things in the real estate world where you use AI? Is it changing it a lot? Is everybody like using it and has a system, or?
It really depends. You've got some people, when people come into my class, the first thing I do is a pre-class assessment.
Okay.
Where we figure out, okay, how long have you been in the real estate business? Because if they've been in the real estate business more than 20 years, they're probably fighting a battle against the wall of, I don't want to use AI because, you know, they've watched Terminator too many times. It can take over the world.
It's changed.
Yes. And then you've got the young people that are tired of seeing the boomers create caricatures of themselves and things like that. When all of the caricatures were going around a couple of weeks ago, I had about a dozen texts and emails from people that are fellow AI instructors, and they said, why did you teach a real estate class to teach all these realtors to do it? Because that's most of the people that were doing it as real estate agents. I was like, I had nothing to do with that because I'm a believer that if I'm doing the same thing that everybody else is doing, then I'm showing that I'm average. So I always want to be doing something that differentiates me from other real estate agents. So I think the main thing that a lot of agents are using it for is writing their listing descriptions. And you can usually tell when you know somebody that can't put together two coherent sentences and all of a sudden their listing description sounds like an article from the New Yorker magazine, you can tell they're using AI. But when you're using AI, we're still at a level, I would tell you that probably about 7 to 8% of people that are using it are actually using it as a business tool. Most people, 92%, somewhere in that ballpark, are still using AI as a toy. And so that's where we've got to build from. And adult learners learn differently than students in middle school, high school, et cetera. And they learn by making mistakes, and they learn by somebody showing them what to do. It's not kinesthetic learning where you can say, go do this, bring it back, let's talk about how to make it better. You have to actually walk them through step by step in what you're doing. And in some cases, we even give people prompts in some of the training classes we do and say, here's a prompt that you can use, save this as a Word doc so you can copy and paste it. That's literally the teaching process for some, because there are many people that you can teach them how to do it over and over again, but they just want you to give them a couple of pieces of value with the prompts and things like that. Yeah. Whereas other people, I'm at a point with my business, I have 13 AI employees that I have built through custom GPTs. Wow. So when I need to do a market analysis, I load in the comparable properties. It gives me the bulk of my work, and now I go back in and edit to handle details and mistakes that it might have made. If I'm working on a marketing plan, it already has my regular marketing plan loaded in, and it put, I'd say, here's the start date. It knows that start date is always a Monday, the way my marketing plan works. So it will say on this date you're doing this, on this date you're doing this, and it gives you some ideas that I may not have thought of to go over and above. So that's where we should be going, but a lot of people are still in that, I want to play with it and create things. And when I went to the Consumer Electronics Show back in January, I figured out that a lot of the days of them talking about artificial and them being all the techno geeks that are the first adopters, they're not talking about language models there anymore. They're talking about artificial intelligence being embedded into everything that we do. And to give you an example, LG's coming out with a refrigerator that when you put your milk into the refrigerator, it reads the barcode on it. It knows that it expires on March 23rd, and it's going to send you a text to your phone on March 21st to say, you got 2 days left on this. Do you want me to add a gallon of milk to your grocery list?
No more smell test.
No more smell test.
Yeah.
Or God forbid, pouring it into a drink and going, woo!
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So that's the way that the technology is evolving at this point.
Yeah.
It's in our cars. We've been using artificial intelligence for years. Everybody's had Siri, and everybody's had Alexa and things like that. But your backup camera that beeps at you before you run into the telephone pole or the mailbox, that's artificial intelligence.
Yeah, that's true. And I see people worried about the change, maybe older generations and whatnot. But you're right about AI already existing in our lives. I was reading an article about people being worried about getting in a car or getting in a plane that wasn't piloted by a human, and elevators used to have an attendant that hit the button for you. And when you had to do that yourself, people panicked.
Correct.
It's kind of silly now that we look at it.
Well, autopilot's been in airplanes since the 1970s.
Right.
So it's not really new. The one difference is that the reason your flights are smoother than they have ever been is because those 737-800s that Boeing had so many problems with, while they were redoing it and putting USB plugs and everything and allowing you to use Wi-Fi and watch your movies, that same technology is allowing the flight to be a better experience in the process. And so we're seeing that everywhere. It's a lot of times people are using it without realizing they're using it. But if you say, hey, I'd like to teach you how to use artificial intelligence, immediately a wall goes up. And I think a lot of it is simply people not being willing to learn a new technology.
Yeah.
And I would tell you that the same people that would not do it today are the same people that said, oh, the internet is just a passing fad in 1995. When everybody was doing the .coms. And then when the bubble hit in, what was that, 98, 99, 2000, when the .com bubble hit and you had so many crashes, those people went, see, I told you. And yet here we are that Amazon is now a $3 billion a month company.
Yeah.
So
making $15,000 every second.
Easily.
Yeah.
Easily.
I would say that I am in between professional usage versus a toy. I am not looking up blueberry pie recipes with it or having it make that, but I am using it to help me develop emails, helping me organize notes that I've taken for something so that I can then develop it into a plan, maybe for a customer. My team is small, and so I definitely see the value of it. I just haven't maybe gotten over the cusp of diving into it.
Yeah, there are so many things that you can do with it from a business perspective. And one of the things, if you've got a website and the blog on your website has become much more of a weapon of mass destruction these days from a marketing standpoint, because because of the zero click effect. 65% of Google searches from July of 2025 to December, 65% of those searches ended without a click. And that's because people are using the AI summary. So if somebody searches, why is Brian Pate the best realtor in Franklin County? Well, the information being fed from my website on the blog is what shows up in that summary in the AI, because I'm creating my website to be a knowledge base when somebody asks about me or somebody asks about a product of mine. And so that is one way. And some people say, well, you're manipulating Google searches. Well, isn't that what we do with pay-per-click? So it's the exact same thing. And a lot of people are now, the people that don't understand how to use artificial intelligence at a mid to three-quarter level, as I call it, are using it as their new Google. And so when they search for me on OpenAI and they type in Brian Pate Realtor Wake Forest or Brian Pate Realtor Youngsville, what are they finding? And I've got to be able to control that. And the knowledge panel that you're using from your Google business profile, the Google business profile is a must these days if you want to compete in an artificial intelligence world. And a lot of people don't know that the Google business profile has an update section on it, which is treated just like a social media page.
Right.
So it's all business. This is not where you post your photo of you doing the cake stand at homecoming.
Yeah, right.
But you post your business stuff on there, and it picks up on that. It ties it into your website. It ties it into your social media. And all of a sudden, you not only have search engine optimization, you have artificial intelligence optimization tied in with social optimization. And that's where the people that are the most successful find themselves these days in the space.
Yeah. Your course, is it just for folks in real estate, or can I join as a printer?
Yeah, great question. So the CE course that I teach for the Real Estate Commission, I would tell you that 95% of the people that take it are real estate agents. But I have had people that are outside of that, and we're getting more of those.
Yeah.
I'm teaching in Charlotte at the end of February for the Canopy Real Estate Institute. We've already sold out a room with 150 people in it, and about 15 of those are not in the real estate business. They're mortgage lenders, appraisers, etc. So we're seeing a lot of the ancillaries come back in. Now, the boot camp that we've created is for small businesses. This is for the mom and pop shop. Maybe their daughter's running their social media for them, or God forbid, they're trying to do that in addition, do all their marketing in addition to running a business. I'm friends with a lot of small business owners through chambers of commerce. I've always focused on the 1 and 2 person operations, and the course is designed for them to make them more efficient. What I did with artificial intelligence, I used to be working 45, 50 hours a week, and now I work about 20 to 21 hours a week because of the efficiency that's been created by those AI employees.
How valuable. My wife and I are business partners, and I think to myself, at first, I want to grow. I want to get big. I want to have a huge facility, 20, 30, 40 employees. That's big to me, by the way. Still considered a small business for the record. But now I think, as I grow a family and we're putting down our roots, I'm like, I want to get better with my time. I want my time's value to increase, my hourly rate for life. I want it to be higher.
Right.
And so I think, how do I quantify my business? How do I look big in corporate, or put a value to my business, even though it's just my wife and I?
So I got a couple things for you. Number one, in order to make your business big, you have to make your focus small.
Right.
My entire real estate career was built on 3 zip codes: the Wake Forest zip code in 27587, the Youngsville zip code in 27596, and the Franklinton zip code in 27525. So I would rather control 5% of the market in that small area than to create 1/100th of the market in the entire Triangle area, where I got to drive to Anger for a listing presentation. That's an hour and 15-minute drive for me. I don't want any part of that. I want to be able to be at home at 5 o'clock. It took me 50 years to find my wife. I want to be there, spend time with her. But the other piece of it is, I think a lot of people, you made a comment that I want to get my hourly rate to a certain thing. I would challenge you that if you're basing your career on your hourly rate while you are working, What happens when you want to take a vacation? You lose that hourly rate. So ultimately what I do, the exercise that I do with people is I say, write down what you made last year. And if you're watching at home, you may want to pull out a piece of paper for this because it's a great exercise. But write down what your gross income was last year. Write that number down.
Okay.
And then divide it by 50 weeks, because most people take 2 weeks of vacation, and then divide it by 40 hours. Normally, people say, well, it's about $30, $35, $40 an hour. Great.
Yeah.
What'd you make while you were sleeping?
Yeah.
Zero. So now we go back and we readjust those numbers. We take that same gross income number and say, now divide that by 365 days and then by 2,000 hours. The average person works 2,000 hours a year, 50 weeks times 40 hours. So divide your income by, and instead of by the 2,000 hours, define it by 24 hours a day, 365. It may only be $3 an hour, but if you can get your investments to the point, see, most people are spending everything they make. If you can live on 25% of what you make, and some people are out there going to go, that's unrealistic. Well, you make more money to invest more money. But the problem is when people typically get a raise, what do? They go out and blow some money. So if you bought a brand new F-250 in the last couple of years and you financed it for 8 years and you're paying $1,300 a month, I don't want to hear a word about your 3% mortgage rate.
Sure.
Because you just blew it. Okay.
Yeah.
But if you can get to the point, if you think about it, and you can get to the point where while you're sleeping, you're making $25 or $30 an hour. Think about the value of that. That's 16 hours a day at $30 an hour versus while you're working for 200. I'm going to outproduce you over time. And whether you're doing that with stocks, whether you're doing it with ETFs, cryptocurrency, whatever it may be, or whether you own an investment property, that money's paying to you every month. Now, is there work to make it happen? Yeah, but that's your 8 hours.
Yeah, right.
Make sense?
It does make sense. And as a fellow entrepreneur and as a business owner, family man, it's hard to figure out that balance, but it sounds like using some AI tools, you can really help organize yourself and be productive in those sleep hours.
Well, you've got to be able to do that, but even with the AI tools, when I go to bed, the AI goes to bed. Unless I've got a project that I'm doing overnight that may be a 45-minute exercise in Claude, I typically want to be in front of it when I'm doing that. When I'm off, I'm off. And this generation that's between, my kids are all between the ages of 21 and 26 right now. They are constantly communicating with their friends. So there is no work-life balance. It's work-life activity, and they balance life inside of work, and then they consciously drop work when they can so that they can have their fun. I think a lot of the population is they're doing both all the time. And I think that's a mistake. Work from home has proven with the statistical data that people actually work more when they're working from home. So that can be a crisis if you lock yourself in a room for 8 hours a day and then you look at your spouse and say, hey, I'm gonna go upstairs and check my email, and you disappear for an hour and 15 minutes because you had something that you said, well, it's just a small thing, I'll knock it out.
Yeah.
You just took away time from your family. My dad's going to be 80 years old this year. And I had a friend of mine that said, how much time annually do you spend with your dad? And I said, probably 12 to 15 days. He says, okay, how long do you expect him to live? And I said, probably another 3 to 5 years. He says, so you've maybe got 45 days left with your dad.
That hurts.
That's an eye-opening moment.
Yeah, it is.
And people always told me when my kids were growing up, enjoy it because it goes fast. And it was kind of funny. I was going home yesterday afternoon and saw 2 little girls getting off the bus, and they looked just like my daughters when my youngest was in kindergarten and my oldest was in 4th grade. Getting on the one time they rode the same bus to school in their school lives. But it just reminded me of, man, I didn't take advantage of those moments like I should have. And today, because of that, my relationship with my kids is not near where I would like it to be.
Yeah.
I'm still making an effort, and they'll tolerate me once in a while.
Right.
It's kind of funny because when your kids turn 13, you suddenly become the dumbest guy on the planet. It takes until you're about 30 or 35 before you realize he was a pretty smart cookie.
Yeah.
And I was the same way with my dad. I mean, I remember looking at my father the day I left Myrtle Beach, August 20th, 1989. at 6 a.m. Everything I owned was in a U-Haul 4x6 trailer and my Mercury 4-door Topaz.
Love it.
It was me, the dog, all of my stereo equipment, all of my, I had the spool, if you remember the spool.
Yeah.
And I looked at, my father looks at me, he says, I really think we should talk about this one more time. And I said, it amazes me that you can be 42 years old and so clueless about the real world.
Yeah.
And about 15 years later, he says, what do you think now? I said, I'm so proud of what you've learned.
That is great. I ask most of the folks that come on this podcast from an entrepreneurial standpoint to give advice to other young entrepreneurs. We're already kind of dipping into that because I'm asking for free advice myself.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine.
But what is your number one thing? Life balance, that was a good point. What is maybe something else that you would tell the young buck out in the real estate world or the mom and pop shop? Here's a little advice from Brian Pate.
Well, number one, when you're starting, I don't think there's any such thing as work-life balance until you've been in the business for 3 years.
Okay.
I don't think you can create work-life balance without knowing what work looks like.
Right.
And until you've done it until you've been through at least 2 tax returns, understanding what a K-1 is, understanding the difference between an LLC and an S corporation, LLP, et cetera, and what the tax advantages, what the legal advantages are of them. If you don't understand that, you're not ready yet.
Yeah.
The best advice I can give to an entrepreneur that's starting out is when you're deciding how to create your LLC, S corp, or whatever it may be, your tax advisor and your attorney, your business attorney that specializes in business, they should all be in the same room with you because they'll tear each other apart. Because the attorney wants you to be an LLC and the accountant wants you to be an S corporation. The attorney wants you to be the LLC because there's protections in that from the limited liability corporation, whereas the S corporation allows you to do some different tax advantages. Both of them allow you to do things like the Section 179 advantage with the 6,600-pound vehicle and things like that.
Yeah.
But setting your business up correctly from the get-go is number one. Number two is anything you do more than once, write down the process and create a manual.
Okay.
So that if, as I've always, a lot of my coaching clients, I tell them, what happens if you get hit by a bus on the way home today?
Yeah.
What happens to your team? I've got one team in Denver, Colorado that I've been coaching for years. He's got 61 people on his team now. They do $150 million a year worth of real estate all over Boulder, Aspen, et cetera. If he goes down, he's the only one that knows how to do everything. Now, luckily, many years ago, he hired an executive assistant at my recommendation, and that executive assistant has experience with policy writing. So now she takes care of that for him. So if something happens to him, his family's still going to be taken care of. They just got to find a new CEO. Makes sense? You have to begin like you already are where you want to be. So, because you can't scale without your systems being scalable. So if you're using a system right now that if you got to 40 people on your staff, you could no longer use, then you don't need to be using that system. And it's from everything with customer relationship management systems, whether you're in a Salesforce or something like that that's doing it. If you've got a document signature that you need for when you agree to do something, you can send it for electronic signatures. You have to be prepared with that. Is that something that can grow with you? How does it file everything? How long are you required to keep all of these? You've got to know all the legal aspects, and that's where your business attorney comes in, and it's also where your tax advisor comes in, because if you're really smart with your money, you can save half of your taxes. Everybody complained about Donald Trump not paying taxes. It's like, you know what? If you could figure out a way to not pay taxes or pay somebody to figure it out for you, you'd do it too.
Do it too. Yeah.
So I remember having a conversation with my ex-wife many years ago when Mitt Romney was running against Obama for the presidency. I think it was 2012. And she's like, I can't believe these people that have offshore bank accounts. And I'm like, we have too, and so people don't realize that. So I've always said, and the students that are in my classes that are listening to this, they're going to roll their eyes, because I've always said, if you know the rules to the game, you can play it at a higher level than anybody else does. And you have to find the nuances to that rules so you can take advantage of them.
Yeah.
It's not because you're cheating. It's just because here are the rules. I can operate in the gray area and be profitable without doing people wrong.
Sure.
That's a big thing for me. If we take care of people, the money will take care of itself.
Right. Well, I think it's a good place to wrap up. It's been so fun to
Absolutely.
talk to you, get both advice and to see some insight on what you're doing in the AI world and the real estate world. Before we sign off here together, can you tell listeners the best way to contact you, or maybe what are good referrals for you? Give us a little plug for what you're doing.
Yeah, so I'm easily findable. If you just go to Google and type in Brian Pate Realtor, and you can just type in Brian Pate Realtor, North Carolina. If you're out of state, that'll get you a little bit closer to it. You're going to see Pate Realty Group, which is my real estate sales and listing arm. We handle listings, sales, land, and apartments. So we do a lot of multifamily stuff. We help investors. And then from the teaching side, if you want to take one of the classes, simply go to brianpateseminars.com. And that's Brian. My last name is spelled like the French pate, but pronounced like you're in the South.
Yeah.
So it's brianpateseminars.com. And we're with the brianpateseminars.com. If you're a real estate agent anywhere in North Carolina, you're going to see the continuing education classes there. If you're outside of the state of North Carolina, stay tuned. We're going to have CE available in other states, hopefully in the next 12 to 18 months. You can also follow me on Facebook. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I'm on TikTok. My wife fusses at me about TikTok, but I got my first business transaction from TikTok for sale in 2025. So there's value in that.
Yeah.
And then my YouTube channel, if you go to youtube.com/Brian Pate Realtor, and you can subscribe there. We've always got, a lot of the stuff that I've talked about today, we talk about in deeper scenarios, both with the real estate sales and with the education aspect. And there's a lot of things out there that real estate people that are not in real estate can get the benefit of. We teach you some of the inside tricks that real estate agents are doing that you can recognize then that'll actually save you money and things like that. So, but we're easily findable. If you just type in Brian Pate Realtor, you're going to see a whole bunch of information. We control the first 4 or 5 pages of Google. And of course, if you've got that AI summary turned on, you're going to find out far more than you were ever interested in.
Again, Brian Pate here in the Workspace podcast studio, the Bonsai Room. That's a wrap. Thank you.
It's been awesome. Thank you, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. You got it.
A business hub where you can go.